I'm Harper Evans, 32, a high school graduate who built a $10 million business from scratch. Growing up in small-town Michigan, I never imagined I'd achieve this level of success, or that my mother-in-law Judith would one day call me uneducated trash at a family dinner. My husband Ethan, my high school sweetheart, always supported my dreams, even when his family didn't. That fateful night, what started as a typical family gathering ended with a decision that changed everything. Before I tell you how I ended up trading my in-laws' mansion for my own beachfront paradise in Hawaii, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, where my parents worked multiple jobs just to keep our lights on. Dad worked at the local factory during the day and drove for a delivery service at night. Mom cleaned houses and waited tables on weekends. Despite their exhaustion, they always made time for me, their only child. They taught me the value of hard work, something I'd carry with me forever. Our small two-bedroom house was nothing fancy, but it was home. I shared a room with boxes of my mom's cleaning supplies and the seasonal decorations she couldn't fit in our tiny attic. While other kids got new clothes every school year, I learned to be creative with thrift store finds. Even as a teenager, I had the entrepreneurial bug. At 15, I started making simple beaded bracelets and selling them to classmates. I'd buy supplies with my babysitting money, create the jewelry during lunch breaks, and sell them after school. It wasn't much, but that first taste of earning my own money was intoxicating. Sophomore year changed everything. I was assigned as Ethan Parker's lab partner in chemistry class. Ethan was everything I wasn't, confident, from a wealthy family, college-bound from birth. With his wavy brown hair and kind eyes, he was also undeniably cute. I was sure he'd be disappointed to be paired with me, the girl who wore the same 3 outfits every week. "You're Harper, right?" he asked on our first day as partners. "I've seen you selling those bracelets." "That's pretty cool." I was stunned that he'd even noticed me, let alone my little business venture. "Thanks. It's just something I do for extra cash." "No, seriously. Most kids our age just ask their parents for money." "You're making your own." "That's impressive." That was Ethan. He saw value in things others overlooked, including me. We made a great team in chemistry, and not just because Ethan was smart. We balanced each other. I was methodical and careful. He was creative and intuitive. Our grades were the highest in the class, and our conversations stretched far beyond chemical compounds. We started dating 3 months into the school year. Our first date was at the local diner where my mom sometimes worked. I was mortified when she came out to take our order, but Ethan charmed her instantly. He had that effect on people. Meeting his family was a different story. The Parkers lived in Lakeside Heights, the affluent neighborhood across town. Their house was practically a mansion compared to mine, with its manicured lawn and 3-car garage. Judith Parker, with her perfectly highlighted hair and tennis club membership, sized me up the moment I walked in. "So you're the girl Ethan's been mentioning," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "What does your father do again?" "He works at Midland Manufacturing," I answered, trying to sound proud. "Oh, isn't that nice?" The way she said it made clear it was anything but. Walter, Ethan's father, was warmer. A successful attorney who'd built his practice from the ground up, he seemed to respect hard work wherever he found it. Ethan's siblings, Grace and Michael, were polite but distant, clearly taking cues from their mother. As high school progressed, Ethan and I grew closer despite the obvious social divide. When senior year came, he was accepted to Cornell University, his father's alma mater. I hadn't applied anywhere. College wasn't in the cards for me financially, and besides, I had different dreams. "You could get scholarships," Ethan insisted. "You're smart enough." "Maybe," I said, "but that's not what I want right now. I want to start working, maybe save up to start a real business someday." He respected my decision, even if his family didn't. Judith was particularly vocal about my lack of ambition. You know she'll never fit into our world, I overheard her telling Ethan one night before prom. A girl with no education has no future. But Ethan stood his ground. Harper is the most ambitious person I know. She just has a different path. We promised to make the long-distance relationship work when he left for New York. I stayed in Michigan, working 2 retail jobs and saving every penny. In the evenings, I taught myself graphic design and basic marketing principles through free online resources at the public library. At 22, while Ethan was finishing his degree, I took a leap and started my first real business, a small social media management service for local businesses. I used my savings to buy a decent computer and set up shop in my parents' garage. Ethan visited whenever he could, always encouraging me even when I only had 2 clients and barely made enough to cover my phone bill. You're building something, he'd say. That takes time. I believe in you. His belief meant everything, especially when it felt like I was the only one who saw potential in my dreams. Ethan proposed the summer after his graduation. We were 24, young by most standards, but certain about our future together. The engagement party at the Parker residence was a study in contrasts, Ethan's joyful excitement versus Judith's thinly veiled disappointment. I always imagined Ethan with someone more established, she commented to her friend loud enough for me to hear. But young love, what can you do? Our wedding was small but beautiful, held at a local botanical garden. My parents spent money they didn't have to give me a special day. Ethan's parents contributed too, though Judith made sure everyone knew exactly how much they'd spent on each detail. During the reception, she cornered me by the bathroom. I hope you know how lucky you are, she said, champagne glass in hand. Not many girls from your background end up with someone like my son. I smiled through gritted teeth. I know exactly how lucky I am to have found someone who values me for who I am. We moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment after the honeymoon. Ethan started his corporate job at a financial firm, wearing suits his parents had bought him and carrying a briefcase that cost more than my first car. I continued building my fledgling business, converting our spare closet into an office space. The first year of marriage was magical despite our tight budget. Ethan never complained about our modest lifestyle, even though he'd grown up with so much more. We made our own fun, cooking experimental dinners, having movie nights on our second-hand sofa, dreaming about our future. My business, however, was struggling. I lost my biggest client 3 months in when they decided to hire a more established agency. Then my computer crashed, taking with it some work I hadn't backed up. The replacement ate through our emergency fund. Maybe this is a sign, I said one night, fighting back tears after another potential client chose a competitor. Maybe I should just get a regular job. This is just part of the journey, Ethan said, holding me close. Every successful person has setbacks. The difference is they don't quit. I tried again with a more focused approach, but my second business attempt, an online boutique selling curated vintage clothing, also failed when I couldn't compete with larger retailers' shipping costs and selection. When we visited the Parkers for dinner that Christmas, Judith didn't miss her chance to comment on my career struggles. Have you thought about going back to school, Harper? She asked sweetly. It's never too late to get an education. Even a community college degree would give you some credentials. Mom, Ethan warned. What? I'm just concerned. 2 failed businesses in 1 year isn't exactly a promising track record. I swallowed my pride. I'm learning valuable lessons from each attempt. I'm sure the lesson is that some people are meant to be entrepreneurs and others are meant to work for those people, she replied with a dismissive wave. On the drive home, Ethan apologized profusely. She has no right to speak to you that way. She doesn't understand what you're trying to build. Does anyone? I asked quietly. I do, he said, taking my hand. And eventually, everyone else will too. It was during this low point that I discovered my true talent. A friend asked me to help promote her small bakery on social media. Having nothing to lose, I created a campaign highlighting the personal stories behind her signature recipes. The posts went viral locally, and her sales doubled in a month. Word spread, and suddenly I had 3 new clients asking for similar storytelling approaches to their marketing. I realized I had a knack for finding the emotional connection between businesses and their customers, something that couldn't be taught in a classroom. I named my new venture Narrative Edge and worked obsessively to refine my approach. Our apartment became my office, with Ethan often coming home to find me still in pajamas, glued to my computer since dawn. I worked 16-hour days, learning everything I could about digital marketing, consumer psychology, and the emerging influencer economy. 6 months in, I landed my first major client, a regional chain of fitness centers struggling to compete with national brands. My campaign focused on transformation stories from real members, creating an authentic community feel that distinguished them from corporate competitors. Their membership jumped 30% in 3 months. When I showed Judith the campaign during a family dinner, hoping finally for some recognition, she merely nodded. "It's nice they're giving you a chance. I hope you're charging appropriate rates." Small businesses often expect work for exposure instead of proper payment. "Actually," I said, summoning my courage, "they've already signed a 6-figure contract for the year." Even that news was met with skepticism. Well, let's see if they renew it. They did renew, and they referred me to other businesses. By the end of that year, I had 7 major clients and was turning a genuine profit. Ethan celebrated each win with me, uncorking champagne for every new contract and listening intently as I outlined my growing vision. "You're going to be unstoppable," he'd say, genuine pride in his eyes. This is just the beginning. For the first time, I started to believe him. By our 3rd year of marriage, Narrative Edge was no longer just me in pajamas working from our apartment. I had hired 3 full-time employees and rented a small office space downtown. Our client list had expanded beyond Michigan to include businesses across the Midwest. What set us apart was our approach, authentic storytelling that created emotional connections between brands and customers. While other agencies were still figuring out how to use social media effectively, we were pioneering strategies that delivered measurable results. At 27, my income surpassed Ethan's corporate salary. The first time I showed him my quarterly earnings, his jaw dropped. "Harper, this is incredible," he said, scanning the numbers. "You've built this from nothing." "We built our life together," I corrected him. "Your support made this possible." With our combined income, we purchased our first home, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. Not quite Lakeside Heights where the Parkers lived, but a far cry from my parents' modest dwelling. I insisted on paying for it ourselves, without the financial help Ethan's parents had offered. "We can do this on our own," I told him. "I want us to build our life based on what we've earned." He agreed, though I could tell part of him was conditioned to accept his parents' assistance. Breaking the dependency was important to me, even if it meant stretching our budget initially. When we invited both families to our housewarming party, the contrast between them was stark. My parents arrived early, bringing homemade food and asking where they could help set up. Judith and Walter arrived precisely on time, bearing an expensive bottle of wine and professional flower arrangement. "It's quaint," Judith said, surveying our home. "Good starter house." "Actually, we love this neighborhood," I replied. "We plan to be here for years." As the business continued to grow, Ethan's pride in my success became increasingly evident. He bragged about my achievements to friends and colleagues, often introducing me as the marketing genius who's revolutionizing how brands connect with consumers. His support never wavered, even as his mother's resentment became more apparent. Judith's comments evolved from dismissive to backhanded compliments. Who would have thought Harper's little social media hobby would turn into a real job? Or, "It's amazing what people can accomplish these days without formal education." Walter, on the other hand, began showing quiet respect. A self-made man himself, he recognized the hustle required to build something from scratch. Occasionally, he'd ask thoughtful questions about my business strategy or market trends, genuinely interested in my perspective. The real shift in family dynamics came when Ethan's sister Grace ran into financial trouble. After graduating from an expensive private university with an art history degree, she struggled to find work that could cover both her living expenses and substantial student loans. "We can help," I offered without hesitation when Grace tearfully explained her situation during Sunday dinner at the Parkers. "What if we cover your loan payments for a year while you get established?" Judith bristled. "That's very generous, but Grace doesn't need charity." "It's not charity," Ethan said firmly. "It's family helping family." We ended up paying Grace's tuition for a specialized digital design certificate program that made her more marketable, plus covering her loan payments until she landed a good job. The gratitude in her eyes meant everything to me. Having grown up with so little, being able to help someone else was a gift. A few months later, Ethan's brother Michael faced a medical crisis, a rare condition requiring specialized treatment his insurance wouldn't fully cover. Without discussion, I transferred the money needed to cover his medical bills, approximately $50,000. When Michael tried to refuse, I simply said, "Family doesn't let family suffer when they can help." The look on Judith's face was complicated, a mixture of gratitude, resentment, and something like shame. She had always viewed me as beneath them, and now I was the one with the means to help her children in ways she couldn't. Our family gatherings took on a different tone after that. The power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the uneducated girl who had somehow trapped Ethan. I was a successful businesswoman who had earned her place at the table, and Judith couldn't stand it. At Thanksgiving that year, she made a show of complimenting my business acumen before adding, "Though I suppose without the burden of college, you had plenty of time to focus on work while others were getting educated." I smiled pleasantly. Education comes in many forms. I'm grateful for the path that led me here. As my business approached the 5-year mark, we had 20 employees, an office in downtown Grand Rapids, and clients across the country. Narrative Edge had become known for transforming how companies engaged with consumers, particularly millennials and Gen Z audiences. I never forgot where I came from. I hired several people from my old neighborhood, including my high school counselor's daughter who needed a fresh start after recovery. I established a scholarship for entrepreneurial-minded students who chose alternative paths to success. And I made sure my parents never had to work multiple jobs again. Through it all, Ethan remained my biggest champion, always believing in me even when I doubted myself. Our partnership was stronger than ever, even as his mother's resentment cast a growing shadow over family gatherings. The day Narrative Edge hit a $10 million valuation was surreal. I was 30 years old, sitting across from potential investors who wanted to take my company to the next level. Their offer included expansion capital, strategic partnerships, and resources to scale nationally while keeping me at the helm. "You've built something remarkable," said the lead investor, a woman who'd appeared on the cover of Forbes. "Your approach to digital storytelling is changing the industry." That evening, Ethan and I celebrated with a private dinner at the best restaurant in the city. We ordered champagne neither of us could have afforded 5 years earlier. To the girl who sold handmade bracelets in high school, Ethan toasted, his eyes shining with pride. "Look at you now." To us, I corrected, "I couldn't have done this without you believing in me." With our newfound financial freedom, we purchased a luxury vacation home in Kauai, Hawaii. 3 bedrooms overlooking the ocean with a private path to the beach. It was our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the mounting pressures of success and family expectations. Ethan, who had been growing increasingly restless in his corporate role, finally made the leap to join my company as Chief Operations Officer. His business degree and corporate experience brought valuable structure to our rapidly growing team, while my creative vision continued driving our strategy. "We make a pretty good team," he said on his first official day, setting up his office next to mine. "Always have," I replied, remembering our chemistry lab partnership that had started it all. With our combined success, We decided to move to a larger home, coincidentally in Lakeside Heights, the same exclusive neighborhood where Ethan had grown up. Our new house wasn't directly adjacent to his parents', but close enough for convenient visits. I had thought the proximity might ease tensions with Judith. I was wrong. The Sunday dinner tradition at the Parker residence became increasingly uncomfortable. What had once been merely passive-aggressive comments from Judith evolved into thinly veiled hostility. Each achievement in my business seemed to personally offend her, as though my success was an indictment of her worldview. Harper's company is expanding to Chicago next month, Ethan announced proudly during one such dinner. How nice, Judith replied coldly. Though I wonder if all this business travel is healthy for a marriage. Don't you miss having a wife who's actually home, Ethan? Harper's building an empire, Grace interjected, having become one of my strongest advocates since I'd helped with her education. And Ethan's right there building it with her. Yes, well, some of us had more traditional values about a woman's role, Judith sniffed. Walter cleared his throat. The business world has changed, Judith. Harper's success is impressive by any standard. I suppose, she conceded reluctantly. Though I do wonder about the longevity of all these internet businesses. Seems like a bubble waiting to burst. As our financial situation continued to improve, I found myself covering more family expenses. When the Parkers planned a family vacation to Europe, I insisted on paying for everyone's first-class flights and luxury accommodations as a Christmas gift. You really don't need to do this, Walter protested, though not very forcefully. I want to, I said. Your family. I funded Grace's down payment on her first condo. I paid for Michael's wedding at a vineyard in Napa Valley. I even covered the extensive renovations on the Parkers' vacation home in Aspen. It was during the planning of those renovations that I discovered something that genuinely hurt. I had been paying for Judith and Walter's country club membership for the past 2 years. Ethan had set it up as an automatic payment from our joint account after Walter had mentioned financial concerns during the economic downturn. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Ethan, not angry but wounded. I didn't want to make a big deal about it, he admitted. Dad's investments took a hit, and they were embarrassed. Mom would be mortified if she knew we were covering it. The same mother who constantly belittles my career and education level? She's from a different generation, he said weakly. She doesn't mean to be hurtful. But she did mean it. And as our success grew, so did her resentment. The dynamic became increasingly toxic, with Judith making comments about new money and how education provides refinement that money can't buy. What bothered me most wasn't the ingratitude, but the effect it was having on Ethan. He was caught between his love and respect for me and his lifelong conditioning to please his mother. After each family gathering, he would be drained and quiet, torn between two worlds. We don't have to keep going to these dinners, I suggested one Sunday night as we drove home in tense silence. They're my family, Harper, he said, fatigue evident in his voice. And I'm your wife. I'm tired of being treated like an interloper after 7 years of marriage. He reached for my hand. I know. I'll talk to her again. But the talks never changed anything. If anything, they made Judith more subtle in her criticism, cloaking her barbs in concerns about our workload or childless status, another favorite topic of hers. At some point, you'll want to slow down and focus on giving Ethan a family, she said during a poolside conversation at their home. A woman's most important job isn't in an office, after all. I had bitten my tongue countless times, respecting Ethan's desire for family harmony. I had overlooked the slights, paid for family expenses without recognition, and tried to win over a woman who had decided from day one that I wasn't good enough for her son. But even my patience had limits, and they were about to be tested in a way I never expected. The dinner that changed everything was meant to be a celebration of Grace's new job at a prestigious design firm, a position she'd earned through the skills gained in the program I had financed. Judith had planned an elaborate gathering at their mansion, inviting extended family and close friends to commemorate her daughter's achievement. I spent extra time getting ready that evening, selecting a tasteful designer dress and the pearl earrings Ethan had given me for our anniversary. Something told me to make an effort, to armor myself in the trappings of success that even Judith couldn't dismiss. "You look beautiful," Ethan said as we pulled into his parents' circular driveway. "Thanks. Let's try to enjoy tonight," I replied, squeezing his hand. This is about Grace, after all. The Parker mansion was impressive, as always, a colonial-style home with perfectly manicured gardens and a 3-story foyer with a crystal chandelier. Judith greeted us at the door, already holding a glass of wine, though it was barely past 6. "Ethan, darling," she cooed, embracing her son while barely acknowledging me. Everyone's in the living room. Grace is absolutely glowing. The evening started pleasantly enough. Grace was indeed radiant, excited about her new role and genuinely grateful for the support I'd provided. "I couldn't have done it without Harper," she told a group of relatives. "She believed in me when I was ready to give up." "Well, she certainly has money to throw around," Judith interjected, laughing too loudly. "Though I'm sure your natural talent would have found a way regardless." I noticed she was refilling her wine glass more frequently than usual, her cheeks growing flushed as the evening progressed. Walter seemed to notice too, occasionally giving her concerned glances that she ignored. By the time we sat down for dinner in their formal dining room, Judith was visibly intoxicated. Her comments grew less guarded, her smile more brittle. I braced myself for whatever might come. The conversation flowed around business success, with several guests asking about Narrative Edge's growth and Ethan's transition to working with me. I kept my answers modest, not wanting to fuel Judith's resentment. "Harper's been recognized in Marketing Innovator magazine this month," Ethan mentioned proudly. "That's incredible," Grace said. "For someone self-taught, you've accomplished so much." "Self-taught," Judith repeated, swirling her wine. "Yes, that's one way of putting it. Others might say uneducated." A uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "Mom," Ethan warned. "What?" "I'm complimenting her resourcefulness. Not everyone needs fancy degrees to make money these days. The internet has made that possible." I took a measured breath. "Education comes in many forms, Judith. I've always been a learner, just not in a traditional classroom setting." "Clearly," she said with a dismissive wave. "Though there's something to be said for the refinement that comes with higher education. The connections, the cultural awareness." Walter cleared his throat. "I think what matters is results, and Harper's results speak for themselves." The conversation shifted as the main course arrived, but Judith wasn't finished. When Grace mentioned possibly starting her own design studio someday, I offered some gentle advice about first establishing a client base while still employed. "That's how I started," I explained, building on evenings and weekends until I had enough business to make the leap. "Oh, please," Judith interrupted, her words slightly slurred. "Grace doesn't need business advice from someone who got lucky with social media. She has an actual education to fall back on." "Mom," Grace gasped. "What?" "I'm just saying there's a difference between a proper business background and whatever Harper does on Instagram all day." Ethan put down his fork. "That's enough, Mom. Harper runs a multi-million-dollar company that employs 27 people, including me. Her whatever on Instagram is revolutionizing how brands connect with consumers." "And who paid for your sister's design certificate?" Michael added unexpectedly. "Or my medical bills last year." "Harper did." Judith's face flushed darker. "No one asked her to throw her money around. If she's so desperate to buy her way into this family." "Judith," Walter warned sharply. "No, I've held my tongue long enough," she continued, her voice rising. "We've all had to sit here and pretend that Ethan didn't throw away his potential on some uneducated girl from the wrong side of town. 7 years we've welcomed her, and what does she do? Flaunts her nouveau riche success like it somehow erases where she came from." The room went deathly silent. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, refusing to give her the emotional reaction she wanted. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Ethan said quietly to his mother. "Me? Ashamed?" Judith laughed bitterly. "I'm not the one who married down and then let my wife support me. What kind of man lives off his wife's earnings?" "A secure one," I answered before Ethan could, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "A man who values partnership over ego." "Partnership?" Judith scoffed. "Is that what you call it when you've systematically turned my son against his family? When you've made my children dependent on your handouts?" "That's not fair," Grace protested. "Life isn't fair, sweetheart," Judith replied. "If it were, my son would have married someone worthy of him instead of uneducated trash who can't even provide him with children." The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. "Apologize to my wife." Now, his voice was cold with fury. Instead, Judith raised her chin defiantly. "Why don't you both just get out? We were better off before she came along with her money and her influence over all of you. Get out of our lives, you lowlife." Walter remained frozen, saying nothing in my defense. Grace and Michael stared at their plates, embarrassed but silent. The other guests shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the implosion of the Parker family facade. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my barely touched meal. "Thank you for your honesty, Judith. After 7 years, it's refreshing to finally hear what you really think." "Harper, wait," Ethan said, reaching for me. "I'll get an Uber," I told him quietly. "You should stay and talk to your mother." "No, I'm coming with you," he insisted. I looked at him steadily. "No, you're not. This is between you and your family now. I'll see you at home." As I walked out, head high and back straight, I heard Judith's voice behind me. "See? She's turning him against us." This is exactly what I mean. The Uber ride home was a blur of contained emotion. It wasn't until I walked into our empty house that I finally allowed the tears to fall, not from sadness, but from pure, cleansing relief. After 7 years of trying to earn the respect of someone determined to despise me, the truth was finally out in the open. And strangely, it felt like freedom. I spent that night alone in our big house, reflecting on years of subtle and not-so-subtle emotional abuse. Every dismissive comment, every backhanded compliment, every time Judith had made me feel less than replayed in my mind. I'd endured it all for Ethan's sake, believing family harmony was worth the personal cost. But at what point did self-respect become more important than keeping the peace? Ethan came home after midnight, his eyes red and his shoulders slumped. He found me on our back patio, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the stars. "I'm so sorry," he said, sitting beside me. "There's no excuse for how she behaved." "Did she apologize?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She said she'd had too much to wine and didn't mean it the way it sounded." I laughed softly. "So no, she didn't apologize. Dad's furious with her. So are Grace and Michael." He took my hand. "Everyone knows she was wrong. But no one stopped her," I pointed out. "Not until you did." They were shocked. We all were. I turned to look at him directly. "Were you really shocked, though? Or was it just the first time she said out loud what she's been implying for years?" He couldn't hold my gaze, which was answer enough. "Why did you stay?" I asked. "After I left?" "I thought I could make her understand how wrong she was. I thought I could fix this." "Some things can't be fixed, Ethan. Some relationships are too broken." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken decisions hanging between us. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "I think I need some space," I said quietly. "I'm going to Hawaii for a while." "I'll come with you," he said quickly. "We'll take a break together." I shook my head. "I need time alone, to think about what I want going forward." "What does that mean?" Alarm crept into his voice. "Are you talking about our marriage?" "I'm talking about what I'm willing to accept in my life. I've spent 7 years trying to earn your mother's respect, and it's never going to happen. I can't keep pretending these Sunday dinners aren't slowly killing my spirit." We'll stop going, he promised. I'll set firmer boundaries. You've said that before, I reminded him gently. But you're caught in the middle, and that's not fair to you either. The next morning, we had a calmer conversation over coffee. Ethan promised to stand up to his mother, to demand a genuine apology, to protect me from further abuse. I listened, loving him for his intentions, but doubting his ability to overcome a lifetime of family dynamics. I need you to understand something, I told him. I won't be returning to that house or having any contact with your mother until there's a real acknowledgement of how I've been treated and a genuine change in behavior. Not words, actions. That's completely reasonable, he agreed. And I'm still going to Hawaii. I need to clear my head somewhere peaceful. He nodded reluctantly. How long will you be gone? I don't know. A couple of weeks, maybe longer. I spent the next day packing and making arrangements for work to continue smoothly in my absence. Our executive team was more than capable of handling operations, and anything urgent could be addressed via video call from Hawaii. Ethan was uncharacteristically quiet as he helped me pack, the reality of our first significant separation since marriage setting in. Just before I left for the airport, he embraced me tightly. I love you, he whispered. More than my family, more than anything. Please remember that. I love you too, I said, meaning it despite the uncertainty clouding our future. That's not the issue. The flight to Kauai gave me time to process my thoughts. By the time I landed, I felt lighter, as though I'd left a heavy burden on the mainland. Our Hawaiian home welcomed me with open, airy spaces and the constant sound of waves crashing against the shore. For the first few days, I did nothing but rest, swim, and walk along the beach. I kept my phone off except for brief check-ins with Ethan and my executive assistant. The mental clarity that came with distance was invaluable. Ethan called faithfully every evening, first with updates about his confrontations with his mother. She says she'll apologize when you come back, he reported on day 3. That's not an apology, I pointed out. That's a power play. By the end of the first week, his calls became tinged with impatience. The company needs you for the Westfield presentation, he said. And I miss you. When are you coming home? The team can handle Westfield, I reminded him. And I'm not ready yet. After 10 days, the tone shifted again. Mom wants to have us over to clear the air, he said, an edge of hope in his voice. No, I said firmly. I told you my conditions. Harper, at some point we need to move forward as a family. We're not a family with your mother, Ethan. We're a married couple who visits your family. There's a difference. The realization that Ethan was gradually sliding back into his role as peacemaker was disappointing but not surprising. It was a pattern established long before I came into his life. The dutiful son who smoothed over his mother's behavior, who made excuses, who prioritized family harmony over all else. Meanwhile, I was experiencing something unexpected in Hawaii, genuine peace. Without the constant undercurrent of family tension, I felt more creative, more energized, more myself than I had in years. I extended my trip, setting up a remote office on our lanai where I could work while listening to the ocean. After 2 weeks, Grace called me directly. How are you? She asked, genuine concern in her voice. Better than I expected, I admitted. How are things there? Tense. Mom's pretending nothing happened. Dad's barely speaking to her, and Ethan looks miserable. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be sorry, she said firmly. You didn't cause this. And for what it's worth, Michael and I are completely on your side. What Mom said was inexcusable. Her support meant more than she knew. Thank you for saying that. Ethan told us you're considering making Hawaii permanent. She ventured carefully. I was surprised. I haven't decided anything yet. But you're thinking about it? I'm thinking about a lot of things. After we hung up, I realized Ethan had been sharing his fears with his siblings rather than discussing them directly with me. It felt like another small betrayal. That evening when he called, I confronted him. Why did you tell Grace I'm staying in Hawaii permanently? Isn't that what you're considering? He countered defensively. I'm considering what's healthiest for us. But I haven't made any decisions, and I certainly haven't shared any with your family before discussing them with you. It's been 2 weeks, Harper. What am I supposed to think? That I needed space after being called uneducated trash by your mother while your father and siblings sat silently? The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Ethan's frustrated declaration that I was punishing everyone for Mom's mistake. As the distance between us grew, I gained clarity about our relationship patterns. I'd always been the one compromising, accommodating his family's expectations, absorbing Judith's subtle and not-so-subtle attacks on my character and background. Ethan had been supportive in words, but ultimately unwilling to create real consequences for his mother's behavior. When he showed up unannounced at our Hawaii home after 3 weeks, I was both touched by the gesture and irritated by the presumption. I couldn't go another day without seeing you, he said, dropping his suitcase in our entryway. You could have asked if I was ready for visitors, I pointed out. Visitors? I'm your husband, not a visitor. We spent that first evening in careful conversation, like strangers relearning each other's boundaries. By the second day, the reality of our situation became clear. Ethan had come expecting me to return with him, to resume our life as though nothing fundamental had changed. I'm not going back to the way things were, I told him as we walked along the beach at sunset. I can't pretend your mother's outburst was a one-time event rather than the culmination of years of disrespect. So what are you saying? You want a divorce because of my mother? I'm saying I want a marriage where my husband puts our relationship first, where I'm not expected to endure abuse for the sake of family harmony. That's not fair. I've always supported you. In private, yes. But when it counts, in front of your family, you've always chosen the path of least resistance. The hurt in his eyes was real, but so was the truth in my words. What do you want from me, Harper? Just tell me, and I'll do it. I want you to decide what kind of life you want, one where you're constantly torn between your wife and your mother, or one where you establish healthy boundaries that protect our marriage. I choose you, he said immediately. I'll always choose you. Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Over the next few days, we began the difficult work of rebuilding trust. Ethan participated in video therapy sessions with me, where we explored the dynamics that had led to our current situation. He came to recognize patterns he'd never questioned before, how his mother's manipulation had been normalized, how his role as peacemaker had become a burden rather than a strength. A week into his visit, Judith called with a half-hearted apology, clearly expecting it would be enough to restore the status quo. I may have been a bit harsh, she said, the speakerphone carrying her voice across our Hawaiian living room. I was only concerned about Ethan's future. 7 years into our marriage, you're still concerned about his future with me? I asked calmly. Well, you know what I mean. Family is important. Yes, it is, I agreed. Which is why I won't subject myself or Ethan to your disrespect anymore. Her tone chilled. So that's how it's going to be? You're taking my son away to your island paradise and cutting him off from his family. Ethan finally stepped in. No one's cutting anyone off, Mom. But things will be different going forward. Harper deserves genuine respect, not tolerance. I've always respected. No, you haven't, he interrupted firmly. And until you can acknowledge that and make real changes, we'll be keeping our distance. It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak to his mother that way. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. After the call, I looked at my husband with new eyes. Thank you for that. He took my hands in his. It's long overdue. And you were right. This isn't just about what happened at dinner. It's about years of disrespect that I allowed to continue. That night, we made a decision. Hawaii wouldn't be just a vacation home anymore. It would be our primary residence, at least for the foreseeable future. We can open a West Coast office, I suggested. Expand the business in a new direction. I love that idea, Ethan said, the excitement in his eyes reminding me of the boy I'd fallen in love with in chemistry class. A fresh start. As we lay in bed that night, listening to the ocean, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The confrontation with Judith had been painful but necessary, the catalyst for change we'd both needed. "Do you think your mother will ever truly accept me?" I asked Ethan, my head on his chest. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I know it's not your job to make her. And it's not mine to make you try anymore." In that moment, I knew we would be okay. Not because everything was resolved, but because we were finally confronting the real issues instead of pretending they didn't exist. Sometimes you have to leave to find your way home again, to yourself and to each other. 2 weeks turned into a month, which stretched into 6 weeks of Hawaiian living. The island's natural rhythm became our own: early mornings walking on the beach, productive work days in our home office overlooking the ocean, evenings watching the sunset with fresh local food. Far from the tension of the Parker family dynamics, Ethan and I rediscovered the easy partnership that had been the foundation of our relationship. We established a new branch of Narrative Edge focused on sustainable tourism and local businesses, tapping into markets we hadn't previously explored. The distance from our Michigan headquarters initially worried me, but modern technology made virtual leadership entirely feasible. If anything, our team seemed energized by the company's expansion. Our therapy sessions continued, sometimes together and sometimes separately, helping us establish healthier patterns of communication and boundaries. Ethan was doing the hard work of recognizing and addressing his family's dysfunctional dynamics, something that took courage I deeply respected. I never realized how much energy I spent managing my mother's emotions, he admitted one evening as we sat on our lanai. "It was just normal to me." "You've been doing it your whole life," I said gently. "Breaking those patterns takes time." Back in Michigan, the situation with the Parkers evolved in unexpected ways. Walter called Ethan privately, offering a genuine apology for his silence during Judith's outburst. "I failed you both that night," he said. "And I've failed you for years by not addressing your mother's behavior." "I'm sorry, son." Grace and Michael began calling us regularly, their relationships with us strengthening without Judith's interference. They even started planning visits to our Hawaiian home, excited to experience our new life. Judith, meanwhile, oscillated between icy silence and performative attempts at reconciliation. She sent an extravagant gift basket that neither acknowledged her behavior nor offered a sincere apology. When that didn't produce the desired response, she tried guilt through intermediaries. "Your mother is devastated," Walter reported during one call. "She hardly leaves her room some days." "I'm sorry she's struggling," Ethan replied, newfound strength in his voice. "But her feelings aren't our responsibility. When she's ready to have an honest conversation, we're open to that." After 2 months, Judith finally called me directly, something she'd never done before. "I suppose I owe you an apology," she began stiffly. "I appreciate that," I said, waiting for more. "I may have been harsh at dinner that night. You called me uneducated trash and told me to get out of your life," I stated calmly. After 7 years of subtle and not-so-subtle disrespect. The silence stretched between us. "I was upset," she finally said. "You've taken my son away from his family and now moved him across the country." "Ethan is a grown man who makes his own choices," I reminded her. "And he's not across the country, he's a phone call away. The distance is emotional, not just physical." "What do you want from me, Harper?" she asked, exasperation evident in her voice. "Nothing," I answered honestly. "I don't need anything from you. Ethan and I are happy here. The question is, what do you want? Because if it's a relationship with your son, you'll need to accept that we're a package deal." There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apology. Just a measured acknowledgement that things needed to change. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. 3 months into our Hawaiian life, Ethan and I made the decision official. We would make the island our permanent home, returning to Michigan only for necessary business and carefully managed family visits. "Are you sure?" I asked him. This is a big change from the life you've always known. I've never been more sure of anything, he said, looking more relaxed than he had in years. This feels right. We converted our Michigan house into Narrative Edge's expanded headquarters, keeping a small apartment for our visits. The company continued to thrive, our remote leadership proving even more effective than our previous hands-on approach. Grace was the first Parker to visit, arriving with wide eyes and a deep appreciation for the life we'd created. I get it now, she said as we showed her around. Why you needed to leave. There's a piece here that doesn't exist in that house. It's not just the location, I told her. It's the boundaries we've established. Michael and his wife came next, followed eventually by Walter. Judith declined our first invitation, but by the 6-month mark, she grudgingly agreed to a short visit with Walter. The Judith who stepped off the plane in Kauai was subdued, almost tentative. Our home, with its stunning ocean views and airy, open design, seemed to humble her in a way our Michigan success never had. You've done well for yourselves, she acknowledged stiffly during their first dinner with us. We have, Ethan agreed, taking my hand. We're building the life we want, not the one others expect. The visit wasn't without tension, but it lacked the toxic undercurrent that had characterized our previous interactions. Judith was on her best behavior, whether from genuine growth or simply the realization that she had lost her power over our choices. I couldn't tell. On their last evening, as Walter and Ethan grilled fresh fish on the lanai, Judith approached me in the kitchen. I'll never understand why someone with your background has been so successful, she said, the old judgment creeping into her voice. Instead of being hurt, I found myself pitying her limited perspective. That's the difference between us, Judith. I don't measure people's worth by their degrees or family names. I look at their character, their kindness, their willingness to grow. I handed her a glass of wine. Life's too short for anything else. Something shifted in her expression, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the first crack in a rigid worldview. It was enough. Over the following year, our lives settled into a new normal. Narrative Edge expanded to 3 offices nationwide, our client list growing to include major international brands. Ethan and I found a comfortable rhythm of work and personal time, finally achieving the balance that had eluded us in Michigan. Our relationship with the Parkers remained complicated but improved. Judith never fully embraced me, but she learned to maintain a civil, sometimes even warm, interaction for Ethan's sake. The blatant hostility was gone, replaced by a cautious mutual respect. The greatest change, however, was within ourselves. I no longer sought validation from people incapable of giving it. Ethan no longer sacrificed our well-being on the altar of family harmony. Together, we built boundaries that protected our marriage while allowing for meaningful, if sometimes difficult, family connections. Looking back now, I realize that Judith's cruel outburst was actually a gift. It forced us to confront the unhealthy patterns we'd been maintaining and make necessary changes. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most important growth. My journey from selling homemade bracelets in high school to building a multi-million-dollar company taught me about business, but my journey with Ethan's family taught me about self-worth. Financial success means nothing if you're still seeking approval from people determined to withhold it. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or prestigious addresses. It's found in relationships built on mutual respect, in work that fulfills you, and in the courage to walk away from situations that diminish your spirit, even when walking away takes you across an ocean. If you're in a similar situation, feeling undervalued despite your achievements, remember that you have choices. You don't have to continue accepting treatment that hurts you, regardless of family ties or history. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being and for creating healthier relationships. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family harmony and self-respect? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, Please like and subscribe to hear more about navigating complicated relationships and building success on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, okay, and walk away from people who can't see your worth. Your future self will thank you.